My neighbor borrowed my dog and now he refuses to give him back. Hey Reddit. This is the most surreal thing I've ever dealt with, and I don't even know where to start. I'm 32F, and I have a 3-year-old golden retriever named Buddy. Buddy is more than just a pet to me, he's my best friend. So you can imagine my shock when my neighbor, Tom, 43M, who borrowed Buddy for a quick walk last week, now refuses to give him back. Here's the backstory. Tom and I have been neighbors for about a year, and we've always been on good terms. He's a friendly, outgoing guy who lives alone. Over time, we started chatting more, and eventually, he met Buddy. He instantly fell in love with Buddy and would often stop by just to pet him or bring him treats. He'd joke about how he was stealing Buddy and would even refer to him as my little buddy like he was his own dog. A couple of weeks ago, Tom asked if he could take Buddy for a walk while I was at work. It was the first time he'd ever asked to take him out alone, but he seemed genuinely excited, and I figured Buddy would enjoy it. So I agreed. When I got home that evening, everything seemed normal. Tom returned Buddy with a big smile and said they'd had a great time. I thanked him, and Buddy seemed happy, so I didn't think much of it. Then, a few days later, Tom asked if he could borrow Buddy again for another walk. I said yes. But this time, things took a turn. The second time, Tom didn't come back with Buddy for hours. I started to worry and sent him a text, asking if everything was okay. He replied that they just lost track of time, and he'd be back soon. When he finally returned Buddy, he looked a little sheepish but didn't offer much of an explanation. I just assumed he'd had a great time and didn't think too much about it. After all, he's my neighbor, and he's been nothing but friendly to both me and Buddy. But last week, Tom asked if he could borrow Buddy for a weekend camping trip. He explained that he'd be alone and thought Buddy would be good company. I was a little hesitant, but he reassured me that he'd keep Buddy safe and send lots of pictures. I trusted him enough, so I agreed, thinking it would be a fun adventure for Buddy. The weekend came and went, and Tom was sending me pictures of Buddy looking happy on hikes, hanging out by a lake, and relaxing by the campfire. But when Sunday night rolled around, I hadn't heard from him. I shot him a quick text asking when he'd be back with Buddy. He replied saying, "He's having such a great time. I'll bring him back tomorrow." This seemed a little off to me, but I thought maybe he'd just gotten too comfortable with Buddy. Monday came and went, and still no Buddy. By Tuesday, I was getting anxious. I messaged Tom again, and he left me on read. I went over to his house that night, but he didn't answer the door. I could see lights on inside, but he was clearly ignoring me. At this point, I was panicking. I kept telling myself that he was my friendly neighbor and that there had to be a reasonable explanation. But then I got a text from him the next morning that read, "I think Buddy is really happy here with me. He seems more at home here. I'd like to keep him for a while, if that's okay." I was stunned. If that's okay? Buddy is my dog, I responded immediately, telling him that it wasn't okay and that I wanted Buddy back ASAP. Tom replied with a long message about how he felt a deep connection with Buddy and that he'd be a better fit as Buddy's owner. He even implied that Buddy seemed happier with him. I didn't know what to do. I tried going over to his place again, but he didn't answer. I called the police, but they told me it was a civil matter and suggested I try to work it out directly with Tom. I felt helpless, but I wasn't about to give up on my dog. So, I decided to play along. I messaged Tom, pretending to be open to the idea of sharing custody of Buddy, hoping that he'd let me come over and see him. Tom took the bait, and I went over to his house under the pretense of discussing arrangements. When I got there, Tom acted like everything was normal, saying things like, "Buddy and I have really bonded. He follows me everywhere." Buddy came running up to me as soon as I walked in, wagging his tail and acting his usual sweet self. It broke my heart seeing him there, like he'd been forced to choose between us. I told Tom that I needed time to process this idea of him keeping Buddy and that I'd be back soon to talk. I left his house feeling more determined than ever to get my dog back, but I knew I needed a new approach. I decided to go to the local animal control and explain the situation. They were sympathetic, but without paperwork proving Buddy was mine, there wasn't much they could do either. It dawned on me that I might have to take this to small claims court if Tom continued to refuse. But before I could even file anything, things escalated. 2 days later, I spotted Tom walking Buddy around the neighborhood, without a leash. Buddy looked happy but a little confused, like he didn't understand why I wasn't coming over to pet him. I called out to him, and Tom glared at me, pulling Buddy back like I was some stranger trying to kidnap his dog. That's when I decided to do something drastic. One morning, I waited until Tom was at work, then I went over and put a note on his door saying I wanted to talk things out and was open to co-ownership. I figured if I could get him to relax a bit, maybe he'd stop keeping such a close eye on Buddy. A few days later, my patience paid off. I saw Tom letting Buddy out into his backyard alone. I waited until he went back inside, then called Buddy softly from across the fence. He came running, tail wagging, and I quickly picked him up and headed straight to my car. I took him to my friend's place across town, hoping Tom wouldn't find us. Tom blew up my phone within an hour, accusing me of stealing his dog and threatening to call the police. I texted back, saying, "Buddy is my dog, and I'm taking him home. We can talk about this if you'd like, but I'm not giving him back." I thought that might be the end of it, but Tom has continued harassing me. He's even tried showing up at my place, banging on my door and yelling about how I broke his heart. I'm considering filing a restraining order because his behavior has gotten so bizarre. Buddy's home now, and I'm doing everything I can to keep him safe. But every time I walk him around the neighborhood, I'm afraid Tom might try to snatch him again. I never imagined my friendly neighbor would turn into this strange, possessive person over my dog. So that's where I'm at, Reddit. I don't know if I need to get a lawyer, file a restraining order, or just move. But one thing's for sure, I'm not losing Buddy again.